Welcome to another episode of Redesigning Your Relationships podcast. I'm your host, Giovanna Burgess White, and I'm here with my co-host.
Hello, everybody. I'm Yvette Valdenegro.
And oh my God, are we excited about today? We have an amazing guest on. Not only is he and his wife, do they have a podcast that's absolutely amazing. He's a storyteller, he's an author, he's a healer, and he's a coach. I have friends in Houston, Texas, and I love it because I have male friends in Houston, Texas who follow him. I recently had a dinner with a close friend of mine, and we were talking, and he came up, and I go, he's going to be on our podcast. I felt so cool. I was like, he's going to be on our podcast this week. And like, I'm like a fangirl, and he's like, are you serious? He's like, I'm like, yes, you're going to tune in live when this drops, and you're going to hear all about him and his story. So without further ado, I am bringing on Rainier Wylde. Welcome to our show.
Oh my goodness, I'm so happy to be here.
I have to say, I know our listeners that always listen in. I really do feel like Geovanna and I give a great dynamic to different sides of the story, whether it's the whole male-female thing or gender or whatever. But in everything, I feel like we really do try to just say, hey, it's all inclusive. But a lot of times, obviously, because we are who we are. So I think that having you share everything about you is going to be so much more intriguing to everybody. And this is going to be amazing. So very excited to have you.
Oh, wow. Well, I can't wait. Sharing everything about me sounds daunting, but I'm up for the challenge.
Everything in short period of time.
Yes. So you were actually our first male on our podcast, which it's not that we don't have them on, but we are relationship coaches. Our podcast and our lives are all about relationships and redesigning the most important ones in your life. So why don't you let everybody know what you do? Because I think once they hear you and know what you do and see you, they're gonna be like, oh, this makes total sense why you're on Gio and Yvette's podcast. So let them know about you.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, anytime someone asks me what I do in this world, it always prompts a bit of an existential crisis. I always think to myself, what the hell do I do, actually? I think the reality is that that I tell stories. I simply bring my whole self into a room, and I try to be as authentic as possible about the places I've been and the ways I've behaved and the lessons I've learned in that. And somehow there's this amazing thing, and I think anyone who knows something about transformation understands that when you do that, when you bring your whole self and when you bring a polished mirror into the room, the other person sees themselves more clearly. And somehow transformation is the outcome of that. So I don't really claim to be too much. You said a lot of really beautiful words, and I've been some things attached to that. I certainly have been a spiritual director and a teacher and a professor and a skills trainer and a psychotherapist and a blue collar handyman, and I've been a fisherman, and I've been oh my goodness, I could keep on naming all the things I've been, but I think the thing I really am is a bit of a bell that gets sounded, and it's kind of like a wake up that happens. And that's just when I observe the aftermath of being around me very long. And so I like to talk a lot about becoming a self, and I like to talk a lot about being in relationship to another whole self. And so that's really what I do. Maybe I'm just a storyteller, a hopeless romantic who gets washed on the shore of our lives.
No, that actually, those two words are what I describe you. You are a storyteller. Your podcast with your wife, amazing. I want to talk a little bit about that later on. But when you guys podcast, I mean, talk about goals. It's like I'm listening to an audiobook, and I'm like, feeling is I can picture what you guys are talking about, and your marketing, which is also super important in the, especially in the world that we live in. I love the way you guys really bring relationships, if it's the good, the bad, what people may think the bad is, because I don't think anything in a relationship is bad, but you guys are real and raw, which is also why you're on this podcast. So today we kind of want to dive a little deep around intimacy and relationships, not only with our partners, but with ourselves. What can you talk about? What do you want to tell our viewers and our listeners around this topic? And we'll just keep on asking you questions because we love to hear your voice and we want to hear you tell the story. So.
Well, thanks for that. I was thinking about this when I was preparing to come on, and something that has really been rummaging around in my head lately, and I've talked about it, I've shared about it on various platforms, but I think it might give an opening here, is that really when we think about relationships, when we think about who we are in relationships, we think about connecting to this other person. And we think about how, oh, she's so beautiful. Oh my goodness, she's the one. Or maybe you've told the story like, oh, he's just like his dad. Or we tell other kinds of stories like, well, I don't think this is worth it. This isn't worth the headache. Or he always does this. Or, oh, she is my twin flame. Or whatever those really interesting words are. And I think the reality that I'm becoming so aware of is we don't really attach to people. We attach to the stories we tell about the people. And we transform them into characters in these narratives that we're telling with our lives. And often those characters are actually just the opposite role of whatever we've determined that we're going to play. Like if I have scripted myself as Alfred the butler, I absolutely need Bruce Wayne in my life. I've got to have Bruce Wayne. And for a lot of my life, I defined myself as the rescuer. I defined myself as the shoulder to cry on. Just give me a good sob story or a broken bird, and I will absolutely swing into action. And so, of course, in order to be the rescuer, I, in fact, had to have broken things to rescue. And so I wondered in relationship why I was always having relationships with despondent, despairing, broken-hearted individuals, and how I was always getting suckered in to this exhausting, depleting role, this emotional roller coaster. Well, here's a great reason. I needed it.
Yeah.
I needed it because the character I had assigned myself was thus. And so the reality, I think, is that mostly our relationships are just stories about relationships. We don't really see the real person, and we're not really invested in being real people ourselves. We're invested in being these characters. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I think that's occurring to me.
I want to just stop right there, because I'm like, oh my God, the 20-year-old generation, the 30-year-old generation who is dating what I call unorganically right now, that's exactly what they're doing. They're creating a persona, a profile, a persona who's not even them. Why do you and it's been happening for decades. I think, the older people are a little different, but why do you think, especially since you're in the same industry that we are, why do you think that is? Why do you think that we've just kind of mentally said, I'm going to be this person, and then 10, 15 years down the road, be like, actually, that's not really who I am?
I think that we're living in an age where the self has never been more of a wavering, flickering flame than it is today. I think we live in a society of emaciated selves that do not know fundamentally what they are, divorced from preferences, divorced from consumer advocates, divorced from the state, divorced from religion. I do not think inherently we understand the definition of self, who we are. And because we do not understand the boundaries of self, who I am in a room without all the voices telling me who I am, we need avatars. We depend on fixed identities and all kinds of special interest groups that we can align with. We depend on the boxes on these websites that you were talking about, whether it's Tinder or Bumble or whatever. That gives us a great degree of safety in our uncertainty. That gives us a great degree of safety in our fragility. I think that we live in an age where we've never been so emaciated in terms of our own sense of self. And because of it, we're completely depleted in terms of relating.
Wow. We didn't pay him to say that. We did not pay him to say that. We talk about self, about being able to really lead, direct, produce, be the star in our own movie. And we choose not to. We choose to, again, pick this persona, pick another person, and then you live half of your life going, like you said, what am I doing with my life? And that's how, go ahead, Yvette. I'll take over.
No, just the fact that even when we present that option and say, this is a story, it is a reel, it's just going over and over and over, and you have absolute power to stop it.
Yeah.
It's like this wave of what? Doubt, unbelief, fear, because it's such a concept that you're right. We are numb to. And it's amazing to me that apparently it seems that our world is getting more and more advanced technology, just the phone alone, to contact someone, you had to do the dial up in your kitchen with the long cord and stand around and talk to the person with everybody in the room that could listen. Now it's instantaneous and the entire world is right here at your fingertips. And yet to me, it seems like our communication and our availability to go deep and be ourselves is getting more and more lost at the same time.
In JRR Tolkien's phenomenal books, his trilogy, The Lord of the Rings, and then the movies that we saw and the shows and all of that, there's this device that kind of floats around that's available to wizards and even the occasional hobbit. It's called the Palantir, and it's like a crystal ball in that universe. And if you touch that crystal ball, you're able to see things on the other side of the world. You're able to peer into people's lives. You're able to be exposed to realities that you would not normally see in your waking life. It gives you great insight. The only problem is that the Dark Lord happens to have access to whomever touches it, so that it becomes a real risk assessment. Is it worth it? Because the more I stay in connection to this device, this thing that allows me great access, great insight, the more I am possessed by it and absorbed by it. So I think this is actually the condition that we live in today, that we do have these things that allow us to see more, see farther, have great access to information, transforms our lives, really. I mean, that's how so many people hear and read my work or encounter me, through these really fragile, beautiful devices. On the other hand, the more I access it, the more I'm integrated into it, the more it owns me, the more I play a fixed part. Yeah. So I think technology and the way we relate across technology is in a very precarious place. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. One thing I think is interesting is when I talk to other people who inhabit that name creator or influencer, most of the people who are content creators that I know, the way we relate to these platforms is very different than the people reading our material. I do not spend much time on that device. I do not spend much of my life scrolling or looking or inhabiting that. Hardly at all. I'm there to say what I say and I'm gone.
Well, you're saying it so powerfully that you can be. And I think, so I want to kind of go back a little bit, because you've said a lot of great things in just that analogy that you did with the movies. But one of the things, and I'm sure it's similar with the people that you coach and your clients and ours, is, again, just like Yvette said, like, we're giving them that power to kind of restart, to hit the pause button. And we spend a lot of time, probably 6 to 8 weeks with our one-on-one clients, trying to figure out, like, what do you want? Like, what do you want? Not your world, not your spouse, not your kids. Do you find that really hard with your clients as well, as you're meeting people? Like, even them identifying with what they do. Everybody's, hi, this is my name, this is what I do. I'm like, why are we conditioned? Why is it so hard to just say, who are you? What do you like? Yeah. What are your dreams? What are your goals? How are you seeing that in your world?
Yeah, I think that one of the most dangerous statements we can make in today's world is be yourself, because quite honestly, nobody has a clue who they actually are. The reality is we are an amalgam of voices, of interests that are far greater than ours. We are so constructed, we are so created, that saying be yourself is rather like, well, which advertisement? It's like, I remember the day when the new Broncos were coming out, and I happened to say, I mused to my partner, Christy. I said, oh, I just love those new Broncos. And she said, well, of course you do. And at first I thought, well, well, what do you mean? And she's like, well, you're their target audience. They have completely honed in on you, love. And of course that is, right? The world is created in such a way to solicit our attention, to draft our interests, and we create ourselves in response to those things. We are not selves. We are corporate interests. We are conditioning. We are circumstances. We are our genetic coding. We are the consequences of our past choices. And by the time you're 35 or 45, it gets to a point where it's almost like, am I even capable of making a real honest choice at all? Can I even choose what kind of hamburger I want? It's almost a miracle if I can decide where to eat, right? The reality is we are so incredibly emaciated. So I actually think a better question than what do you want, I've noticed with the people I end up engaging with, is what can you no longer tolerate? What can you no longer tolerate? Almost what can you no longer stomach? Because that's where it gets to eventually. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. we have a clients that we work with that we rebalance with their business, and they're like, but we don't know what our ideal customer is. And we always go, what is the customer that you hate working with? And then let's build the one that you want. And so I love that you just said that. So it's like, okay, you don't know what you want, but you definitely know. Oh, everybody wants to complain. Everybody wants to point the finger at the situation, the excuse, my past. Okay, what can you do now? What today? Like, that's the great thing about what we do. It's the present. We're not worried about the past. We can't change it. And you can't be worried about the future, but we do want to get you excited. Like, we're here on this earth for a reason. We have a life that we get to co-create for a reason. We're the only being that gets to do that. And why is it so hard to just, again, I think it's the stopping. People are pause, like don't overthink it. Let's just give ourselves some time. No, time. They're complaining about time, but they don't want to give themselves time.
Oof, it's so good. Yeah. You know, I think that one of the things, and you said it, slow down. And I think that really is when people come to the threshold of transformation, it's because there's been a crack in the ice, right? And if you think about how we kind of are born almost as these limitless potentials in life, I'm from the Pacific Northwest, and there's these beautiful mountain lakes up here, and sometimes you stumble on them and you see these really beautiful, teeming, bursting, life-filled bodies of water. But if you can almost think about, that's really how we are. We are brimming with potential. We're brimming with life when we're born. But the cold winds blow, the winter sets in, frustrations happen, the outer circumstances occur, and ice forms over that lake. All of that potential is now protected by that ice. That's what happens. We defend and we protect, and we develop these powerful coping strategies that become the outer surface by which people interact with us. Like, I step foot on the ice, right? Well, that's how most people interact with us. They step foot on what we call our personalities. But really, our personalities are just these coping strategies and defense mechanisms we put in place to protect us. But they also prevent that potential from coming out. So by the time they come to people like you or me, what has happened is there's a crack in the ice that's occurred. Someone experiences a tragedy. They go through a divorce, or they experience a job loss, or there's been a death in the family, or they've had a brush with mortality, or they've lost their reputation, or it no longer makes sense, or their religion has stopped holding anything for them. And suddenly there's a giant gaping hole in all of their elaborately constructed defenses. And they come to people like us. They come to healers. They come to helpers. They come to coaches and teachers and pastors and priests and therapists and all kinds of people who promise solutions. But anyone who's worth their salt, any healer who's worth their salt, knows that just patching the ice back up is no solution. And that's what people want. They want it fixed. Give me my job back, my car back, my spouse back. But actually, a real healer cracks the ice open all the more. Yeah. It makes it very unstable to walk on. And then suddenly you have real choices.
Oh my God. mean, talk about what we do in I feel like you say it in a whole nother world, in a whole nother language, but I absolutely, that's right. People want the Band-Aid, the quick fix, and they don't want to do the work. Oh my God, the work. It's like, but why can't I just click here, do this, make a payment, and it happens? And it's like, that's because the world is that way. But when it comes to really digging deep in, I mean, whatever you want to, mind, body, soul, universe, it's a lot of work. And the work is you. There's nobody else but you. Go Yvette.
Okay. I know in my head, I'm like, in my head, I'm just like, it's almost like for anybody listening to this, I always feel like people listen for a reason and it just happens for a reason. It's almost like just take a big breath, who's ever listening. And I want you to just, because to me, it's that the next layer, the layer of that makes, say I'm listening and I go, okay, that makes sense. I feel that. I hear it. You descriptively gave me such a picture that I can hold on to in my head and so relate, and it's doing something. That crack is there. I kind of want to go like another layer, and I don't really know what that means. I just want you to keep talking, really, and just saying whatever comes up to you, because I really do, like when we meet with people, it's like that aha moment of really getting that. Because that's what, like Gio just said, that's where the work begins. And our first instinct is so much to put on the Band-Aid, walk away, resist, the opposite of really what we should do. But I just want to take this moment to like, if there's anything that you could share or just go deeper or more with that moment.
Yeah. Well, I remember that moment for myself, actually. I remember that incredibly painful place where the ice no longer held weight. It had all been cracking around me. It had involved infidelity. It had involved loss of career. It had involved so many different losses that I could barely breathe. And it was one of those moments where you just recognize that none of it's working anymore. None of it's working. And of course, when you first realize that, it is the most profound agony, I think, because it's everything you've known, right? You can say it's not working, but that's not helpful. That's terrifying, right? And so the profound courage it takes to say it isn't working and I have no clue what's next. And I was really at that point. And I didn't know, in the light of all these different things that were happening in my life, if my spouse was going to leave me. I certainly didn't know if I would, continue to have any relationships left. I was in this very dark moment, and I had just gotten a particular piece of bad news. I was sitting in the car, and my partner was sitting next to me, and I remember just beginning to sob, like one of those animal sobs. I kind of chuckle about it because it's so rare in life, I think, for people just to begin to moan, incoherently moan. It was like the life had been kicked out of me. I was lower than the floor, and this moan just continues to build, and I'm blubbering. I'm just totally sobbing right there. And the only thing that can go through my head in that moment is, does it end? Does this ever end? And the strangest thing happened. I can hardly describe it, which is why I don't talk of myself as much beyond sometimes I think that I'm a spiritual teacher more than anything, because this feels so spiritual to me. But I remember that it was as though someone turned on a light, and a very kind, gentle kick in the face presence came. And it was as though a voice said, no, it doesn't end. It doesn't stop. It's never going to stop until the day it does. It's always going to be a tussle, up and down, in and out, back breaking, and it's going to be ecstasy right along with the agony. And then, because I love women, it was as though the voice said, life is like a woman. She's going to mystify you and delight you and torture you and tease you and frustrate you and tempt you and encourage you and hold you. All the same, fall in love with her. Fall in love with life. I mean, really, that was the sum total of it. And the tears started to dry in that moment. And I can't describe it any better than I fell in love with what is. I fell in love with what is. I didn't realize that I was adequate to the life I was living. What I realized was that I had never really been a self at all. And in that moment, something tougher than granite, something very small at first, was born. And then from that moment forward, something grew around it that enabled me to walk through these very hard places, very difficult conversations, knowing that if I simply stayed true to that still small place and operated from that almost hilarious, absurd reality that life isn't going to quit. It fires at you point blank. Yeah, as Ortega said, the quality of life is its coerciveness. Yeah. And I think that when I recognized that and fell in love with it and then began to operate from that space, life began to transform in incredible ways.
Wow. Yeah, that was the next that. And that's why it's hard for people to talk about themselves, but this is a perfect example of why, because you're the storyteller. You painted the picture for us with the ice, but this is real. This is real life that nobody wants to talk about, and you can't get to that next level. You can't even move on. People stay stuck there. They stay stuck there, and it's woe is me. This is my life. You don't understand, and I go, no, but yes, everyone has something that's happened to them. And it's going to keep, like you said, it's going to keep on happening. We're not going to tell you it's going to be perfect forever. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about your podcast, you and your wife, because people will kill me if I don't ask about how it is that you have this amazing podcast with your wife. You work with her. Tell me a little bit about that relationship, because I know I tell you, my husband and I working together, I mean, I'm never going to say never, but it's going to take, and I love him. I love him so much, but you two, I mean, how did that even happen? I mean,
one of the things, one of the things is that we both had this rather spontaneous response to one another the first time we met each other, which is to say that there was chemistry, which is to say that something in her family of origin really connected to her family, to my family of origin, and something in her trauma connected to my trauma. And I was a secret keeper and she was an avoider. And oh, did we ever fit together like lock and key. And somehow or another, for the first half of our relationship, we gave each other the gift of illusions. Which by that, I mean that we simply avoided all the really hard conversations. You had two people who were clinically trained, who knew better, who asked nothing of one another, no deep questions. We simply accepted each other as they were, as they occurred in that moment, which we really loved and felt really wonderful for a really long time. Turns out there was a lot going on under the surface. I had a previous marriage which had ended largely because of my profoundly bad behavior, my choices that included infidelity. But of course, I left that experience thinking the problem was her. And thank God I solved it by divorcing her. Oh, how wonderful, which conveniently allowed me to transfer all of my undealt with issues into the next relationship. And so I blissfully went along creating the deeper and deeper and deeper and more underground basement of shadows, which included continued infidelity, continued lies, this vault of deception to even myself. And eventually it all came out. And I really had a choice, which I was kind of talking about in that moment, where I had to decide, am I going to be honest or not? Am I actually going to address what is instead of avoiding it like the plague? And there was a lot of consequences. Some people think that hard choices like that make things better. No, they don't. They make things worse. But eventually they get better. But at first it's really bad. And it was really bad. It was really bad for a really long time. But I knew that if I just continued to stay true, if I just continued to be as authentic as I knew to be in that moment, which, by the way, in retrospect, I look back and I go, oh my God, there was like 0 to like 0.5% authenticity. that was like the level of transformation. But, you know, I was taking the steps I knew, and every inch forward, I was taking more and more and more. And she made this really brilliant decision, which I would never advise anyone to do, to stay with me. We laugh. We just had our anniversary and we laughed. We said, oh my God, we would never advise anyone to do what we did. But she did. She chose to stay, and for a lot of reasons. And she chose to confront her own things. We walked through hell. We walked through hell, and we walked together. And one of the things we recognized early on was that we were both profoundly traumatized individuals who came in knowing that the other person held the key. We just didn't know how. And of course, what really it was that we were walking into a hospital, and our relationship was the hospital of two souls that needed one another. So, you know, she is my lover, she is my friend, but, you know, in so many ways, she's also the great wound that helped reopen me up to all the things that had been kept hidden. And so, really, we see ourselves as having rediscovered each other, having walked through a love like hell, which our podcast is called Love Like Hell. One of the things we know is about beginnings, about how relationships usually begin and then how they may re-begin. You know, we meet under a very illusionary set of circumstances, then we collude with one another to keep the illusions, and then there's disillusionment. And that's where most relationships end, with disillusionment. Oh my God, he's not who he said he was. Imagine. I'm not who I said I was. Wow, that's confronting. I'd rather go and transfer that to the next person. We chose to push through that disillusionment and to recognize that taking off the mask was about the best thing that ever happened to us. That meant that we had to create new agreements and new realities because we were dealing with two new people. Yeah. And that was a lot of pain because we had to shed a lot of different beliefs we carried into that. And what ultimately happened out of that was not union again, not ground level, but communion. Yeah. Which is like 10 levels up, right? You're building on the rubble and the rubbish heap of the past. You're building on those things. It's a profound, profound relationship. And eventually, you know, we were invited into so many different spaces with individuals or couples to just walk the journey with them as peers and mentors. My wife's a marriage and family therapist, and I certainly have had many different experiences. And so what we found was we were coming alongside of people in their relationships. And we realized we needed to offer that to more and more people. And one of the ways of doing that was a podcast. So what we wanted to do with our podcast was to get right in it, to tell our story, which helps normalize a lot of other stories out there, which are love like hell. And you can get through it too, however that looks. So these are some of the things we talk about in our podcast.
Oh my God. I love your podcast, by the way. I mean, I put it's on my list of like every week. And I think because of what we do, and we used to coach engaged couples, which we thought we were really helping them before marriage, and, you know, sex, intimacy, compatibility, non-negotiables, finance, and really just kind of pre-warning them like this is going to happen. And to them, it was like, oh, well, we're in love and everything's great. That's not going to be us. And now that we just coach women in their marriage and with recovery after divorce, during and after divorce, you guys do bring it, and you bring it to the table real. And I do think that you said something earlier, well, a lot of things earlier, but one of the things that I want our listeners and our viewers to get is that there is not a perfect relationship, and whatever your hell is, there's hell. The sooner you deal with it, the sooner your relationship is going to become stronger, and it's going to become whatever the best relationship is for you and your partner. That's when it becomes the best. And I don't think people want to go through that. It's like, but they go through the beginning of this podcast, living a complete life that's not theirs. And they're teaching that to their children, and then their children are teaching that to their children. You never have real friends. You never have a real life. You never have a real relationship, you know? And so I thank you, because again, we're not scripted, for those everyone that knows us, we didn't really talk about what we wanted to, a topic today, because relationships is life. They are part of life. And you have not only just shared your experience with the people that you help, you as a person, you with your partner. I do feel like we're going to have a lot of our listeners, a lot of our viewers follow you and just really connect, because that's what we need. We need people like you and your wife who are able to just be real and understand, and also understanding, not being judged. This is the world that we live in. And oh my God, I'm gonna get really cry. I'm gonna cry right now, because okay, go Yvette.
I was just gonna say, I love the fact of how vulnerable. Well, first of all, your story is very vulnerable. I think everybody's story is vulnerable, but you're very vulnerable. Keywords, even just infidelity. That's especially, I will just say, for the person who has been hurt by that in any way, for some reason, it's such a word that again, masks. We don't talk about it. There's so much shame around it. Whether you were the person, the other person, it doesn't really matter. So just the fact that you bring up a topic that people don't even really want to discuss, because even when Gio and I meet with women as far as their divorce, unfortunately that happens, and that is a wound. But people still don't want to talk about it because of the embarrassment. But I thank you for even bringing that up, and just even your vulnerability in general, because I just know that people just think if I'm vulnerable to the other person, it's like an automatic, I'm stepping into not the beautiful lake that you described. They feel like they're stepping into I'm sorry, this is what came to my mind, like a poop pit. Like I'm going to step into some shit. And I don't want to do that, because that, again, the triggers, it happened before, that instead of going, when you go in with it with the right intentions, and yes, like you're saying, you're understanding self, and it comes from such a different motivation. No, vulnerability does not mean the fear and the, oh my God, vulnerability means, do you know that there is so much more? It's like there's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Yeah. The negative becomes the absolute positive, because when two people are so vulnerable together, that is the magic. That's the secret sauce. Talk about intimacy. I mean, okay, I'll say this out loud to everybody. So yeah, I love sex. Love sex. Hi. Who doesn't, right? But the true intimacy is that vulnerability.
That's right.
Your true self.
That's right.
What makes something so magical. So I know the people. Yes, I think people are going to flock to your podcast from just listening. But I just thank you for just sharing everything that you did and just being so open to all of it.
And before we let you go, tell us exactly how you prefer people to follow you, because I know in this world of everything, what is the preferred method for you?
Yeah. Instagram is where it's the sandbox I play in. And if you can follow my stories, we don't work with a lot of people. We take on only a few people. We walk this journey with a year, but sometimes we post that we're opening the wait list there. We're actually just wrapping up our very first course that we've taught. We're really excited about that. And so there's different opportunities that we allow for, and you can always see when we post new podcast episodes or talk about things. So Rainier Wylde is the place where you can find all that good stuff. And I put out a book last year. You can get that off of Amazon, and called As You Are. That is one of the most annoying things in the world. If we could just take a tangential side note, turns out Amazon, you have to take this backwater trail to get to my book. You can't just type my name into the search. You actually have to be in the books department to do so. So if you're wondering, listening to this, go to the books section of Amazon and then type in my name. You'll be fine. That'll take you where you need to be.
We're going to put everything in our show notes. Again, we're on all social media platforms, so we'll have all your information there. I am in shock that I got I don't even know what that was, but that means that this is real. This is the real world that we live in, and I appreciate you being on and sharing. We're definitely going to have you back on, so just know that. And again, I love that you said that you only work with a few, because it's about quality, not quantity. And so if you can't work with them, follow them, because Yeah. You got something from this podcast. You're going to get something from their storytelling, from their real storytelling, which is what I love. And thank you for I'm glad that the universe connected us. Thank you for being here. And actually, I would love to have you and your wife on together. I think that'll be that'll be great. And we can dive deeper into the journey, the walk. I love that.
Anyone who sits with both of us at the same time knows why I occasionally go on shows without her. It's only so that I can actually have a moment where I can say anything, because the truth is she is just so incredible and you just want to listen. I just sit there and just ask her to share more. So I would love to have her on and be on the show with her. That'd be amazing.
Wonderful. Well, we thank you for your time. It's super valuable for us, and we appreciate you for being here for our viewers and our listeners. Thank you again for being on. We're going to go ahead and have you jump off, and then we will close our show. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh my God. Talk about amazing. I don't even know what happened. It was just like, I couldn't even say the words. I think my body was just like, this is why we needed to have him on. You and I, we're all about the women's world, but I do believe what him and his wife are doing is amazing. And they both have a strong presence on social media. And it's not pretty pictures, which, I mean, they have good branding, but it's a story. When you go through their posts, it's like, I'll read it again. Like, read that one more time. It's exactly what we're saying, but I feel like in a different language, even though it's English. They again, more of a spiritual healing world, but it's exactly what we teach. And there's people that need to see it, feel it in different forms. And so I'm glad that he was on to share that with us.
I can't say how you feel, but I'll just say how I feel. We both love raw and real. He's real. And as much as I think that I feel like what we do is such an introductory, like, hey guys, this is what we're doing. We want to help women. Like, this is amazing. Like, this is how your life can be. We can help you redesign everything. I feel like he took it to another depth level of just, like he said, the stories, his examples, and then his word usage, because he creates such a picture that is so vivid that you can so connect to. But he's unashamedly just telling his story. And I just think that realness is what our world wants. And even the women and the people that we work with, it's like, let's just get down to reality. I mean, we're really here to help. And all of us want to have a dynamically amazing life that when now, 2 weeks, 2 years, 2 decades from now, that we are making choices that get us where we want to go, and that we're, all those things. His whole aura just like wrapped that up. But it's like I don't know, it's just like at this pure, wonderful level of what I really do believe all of us, including you and I, want. And so just like to hear it from someone else. And I'll take it one step further. I don't want this to be weird, but I feel like when people are older too, it's that voice of wisdom that speaks in such a different way, because let's just face it, I'm the age I am. I've only had so many years to experience. Same for you, but he's had more years to experience life and to speak about things that are near and dear to him. And both of our hearts, the reason what we do is because obviously we love it, but we 100% know that people can transform and change and redesign. And to hear someone else speak that language in a different way, it's like we get to kind of get on that train with them.
Yeah. Well, we'll have all their information. Like, I really do want you, if anything, just goes into the podcast. And I love that they're doing it with couples, because, I mean, that's what we used to do. And I think it's really important for men and women and partnership and everybody to have that. I mean, it's like, you got to walk together in this life. If not, it's not a partnership. You're just roommates. And I think that's why I love their story so much, because they restarted, and they share. and she's amazing. I've listened to her on the podcast, and I think that's going to be a great follow-up, is having them both on. Hey, he can watch her talk. That's fine.
Oh my God. So good.
Well, great.
Great.
Well, thank you for watching, and thank you for listening to another episode of Redesigning Your Relationships podcast. We're here for you. We're here to serve you, whatever topics you want to hear. We can always do follow-up questions too if they can't come on right away. Let us know what you want. Let us know who you want to be on. This fall, I feel like we have a great lineup forever now. We have great stuff coming up, other series that we're going to be doing, conferences we're going to be part of, conferences we're going to be hosting. So follow us anywhere at YG Collaborations, and then also just calendar of events. If you're in Houston, the Houston area, go to our calendar. We have things going on all the time. We would love to see you in person, meet you in person, work with you in person. Anything else before we go?
Yes, I just wanted to say, obviously we are very touched, right? So I'm gonna make a huge assumption that anybody listening to this is very touched. So I just want to say again, you can go to YG Collaborations, go to our calendar link, get on there, make an appointment. We definitely offer a connection call, and we want to know how you were also touched too, or just send us a DM in our Instagram, whatever. We just want to hear what your thoughts were as well.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you said that, because this is going to be a great one for social media. If you are listening to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, all the podcast platforms, take a screenshot, tag us, tag Rainier, because I would love to kind of like keep this circulating, this vibe, this aura circulating, and give us a review. We need reviews. We love reviews. We want other people like you to listen to our amazing podcast. And I forgot that we have an amazing sponsor this month. Our podcast manager, Haley Murch. She is sponsoring our show. For everyone who thinks, oh, Gio, I can't have a podcast, it's not for me. Podcasting is for everyone. If you are there to educate, serve, give information in your niche, in your industry, reach out to Haley Murch. Her information will also be in the show notes. She's amazing. Without her, we would not have this amazing platform. It wouldn't be beautifully branded and done. We really get to do the fun stuff, and then she takes it from there and does all the other stuff for us. So thank you, Haley, for being our sponsor for this episode. So we'll see you again every Wednesday live, every Friday, new podcast.